All right, the watch we're going to take a look at today was recently featured in a popular movie a few years back. It's a vintage reissue of a classic Citizen chronograph that actually is a budget reissue. It comes in at right around $250. I believe this is a JDM release, but take a quick look at it and see if you can guess which movie it came from. Hey guys, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave and I live in Japan and I love to collect affordable watches. And that puts me in an advantageous position when it comes to getting my hands on JDM releases, Japan domestic model releases. So today I'm excited to show you guys this Citizen Tsuno Chrono. It's kind of a challenge timer reissue. Now, if you saw the intro and guessed that this was the watch that Brad Pitt wore in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you're exactly correct. He wore it on a leather cuff strap. And I don't know if Citizen saw the movie and that's why they decided to reissue this watch, but they did it on a folded link metal bracelet. And we'll get into all that in just a minute, but I also did get my hands on a bun strap that will fit this because I wanted to try and sort of recreate that look a little bit from the movie. But first, what is this watch? Let's get the dimensions and specifications out of the way first. You're getting a 38mm diameter case. It's kind of a cushion case shape, which only has 42mm lug to lug, which means the watch is going to wear very compact on the wrist. It has 18mm lugs. It's 12mm tall with a domed mineral crystal. You get 50mm of water resistance with a press-on case back. And this is a battery-powered quartz. It's not one of their EcoDrive lines, so one of their most basic movements that Citizen offers. It's a chronograph movement, but the chronograph hand only ticks at 1 tick per second. However, it does feature a 12-hour totalizer, so it'll record up to 12 hours on the chronograph, which is really cool and something I wish you would see more of on quartz chronographs these days. And as mentioned before, it comes on a folded link bracelet. However, it's a pretty high quality bracelet for being folded links. I typically don't like folded links bracelets because they tend to pull hairs. This one wasn't so bad on my wrist. Now again, this is a JDM Japan release, and it comes from a line of watches that Citizen has called their record label. And record label's kind of an odd name for a watch line, but this is why Citizen says they named it that. This is from their Japanese site that says, Hei o nagareru BGM no you ni, jikan ya kukan o irodoru uredoke. So roughly that means watches that add color to time and space like background music flowing through a room. They say that these watches are meant to capture the indie spirit, and they have a little cartoon of a guy wearing a beanie listening to a record. But what you get in this collection are a lot of really vintage inspired pieces. They've gone back in their back catalog for a lot of these. Various different movements. There's one with an automatic movement that has kind of a cool day-date display, sort of a dressy looking piece I'm kind of interested in. And all of them are right around this $250 price point, so relatively affordable. It's a really interesting collection of watches. I might try getting some more of these in the future to check them out. But this one really shot to the top of my list because of that connection with the Brad Pitt movie. And it's just such a cool watch for them to reissue, and it's rare to see a reissue at this price range. And Citizen has done this sort of Tsuno chronograph, this bullhead chronograph before in recent times, but it's got more of a modern appearance. This one seems much more faithful to the original vintage challenge timers, other than it being a quartz movement. But the size and the design is very, I think, vintage. So really cool to see that. So on one hand, it really does look like a pretty good bargain seeing a vintage reissue of a classic chronograph come in at under $300. But if you look at the actual components of the watch, you know, mineral crystal, kind of a basic quartz movement, folded link bracelet, 50 meters of water resistance with the press-on case back. It's not a very high-spec watch. So I think a lot of your value is really coming from the heritage and the styling and the look, which is very unique and I think is going to be enough for a lot of people. Now I want to talk about the design and also the lume on this watch, which is surprisingly good for what Citizen is offering. But before we do, I want to remind you guys to check out the t-shirt store if you haven't already. I've now got hoodies in stock as it's getting colder weather. But I've got some new designs, including this new turtle design for anyone who's a fan of Seiko. Link down in the description if you're interested in checking that out. Now let's talk about the design of this watch. Obviously the main design characteristic is that bullhead look. Moving the crown and pushers to the top of the watch gives the watch a very unique look. It does kind of have the silhouette of like a bullhead. The two chronograph pushers kind of look like horns. And it's probably a style of watch that you don't have in your collection. So this is definitely a watch that has a lot of character to it. And that character continues in with the case design on the watch, which again is very faithful to the original Citizen Challenge timers. It's a very curvy case. Very rounded edges, no sharp corners at all on it. They've gone with a fully brushed surface on the case of the watch. And then even the side profile has a nice curve to it, which for me was kind of unnecessary because it has such a short lug to lug at only 42 millimeters. It could have been completely flat and worn fine on my wrist. But if you have a smaller wrist than me, the case, it does have some curvature to it, which may help with that. Sitting on top of the case is a black bezel that adds kind of a cool sporty look and frames the dial very nicely. And this one comes in a number of different colorways, but I have the navy dial with orange accents. And the dial and markers are very well done. Really beautiful color blue, nice sunburst effect. And the markers are applied and filled with a very bright lume. And while the hands look nice and the colors kind of complement the watch well, I think if you look close, they do have kind of a fairly flat, thin, maybe stamped metal look to them. They don't look particularly high quality. That's one of the areas that I really noticed as being maybe a lower quality than some other watches in the same price range, even from Citizen. But perhaps even more kind of annoying is that chronograph second hand, which you might have noticed on this one is misaligned. And making things even worse, this is a chronograph movement that only ticks once per second. And the alignment almost feels like it's like a half second off, so almost as bad as it could be, which means that it's fairly difficult to accurately read the time on the chronograph down to the second because the hand's always kind of in between markers. A chronograph is meant to allow you to time things to a very accurate degree, at least down to the second. So it's unfortunate that the chronograph is misaligned. I know Citizen has some chronograph movements where the hand ticks 5 times per second, and I think that would have been a much better choice to see. And I think at this $250 price range, it wouldn't have been unreasonable to expect that. And so that was probably the biggest disappointment about this watch. And one thing that I do really like about this movement is the 12-hour totalizer. So this chronograph will record seconds, minutes, and hours up to 12 hours, which is actually kind of a rare feature to see on quartz chronographs in this price range. Now the action on the chronograph is okay for a quartz piece. You do get some tactile feedback when actuating the chronograph to start it. However, that sort of tactile click is only when you start the chronograph. When you stop it, it doesn't have that, so that's a little bit jarring. But then when you go to reset the time, you get that tactile thing back. So I think there's like a lever inside that sort of bounces back and forth between the two pushers to sort of give you that tactile feedback. But that means if you press the same pusher twice in a row, the second push doesn't get that feeling, which is fairly common on a lot of quartz chronographs that I've experienced. Now, last thing on the dial that I want to mention, this has kind of a 4:30-ish date. It's not exactly at 4:30, and the date is not color matched, so it's a white date. I feel like that kind of stands out. That's one more thing I would have liked to have seen is either a black date or even better, a navy blue date. So the dial already has a lot going on. I don't think you really need the date also sort of jumping out at you. It would have been nice to see that a little bit more subtle and blended in. Now, one thing that Citizen did not skimp on is the lume on this watch. It is extremely bright and it lasts very long. It has a nice cool blue glow to it and looks great after dark. Now, the lume plots on the hands and markers are fairly small, but even despite that, it still keeps up really well. And in my 1-hour J-score test, it scored a surprising 7, which is really high for a chronograph watch. Definitely outlasts a lot of divers that I've tested. For reference, on my J-score scale, the Seiko Samurai, which is a diver, scores a 10. So this is about 70% as bright as one of Seiko's entry-level divers. Now, the watch comes on a flat link folded metal bracelet, which looks really cool. It fits the vintage aesthetics of the watch. It's relatively easy to adjust the size and actually is fairly comfortable on the wrist. Now, I typically hate folded link bracelets, especially from Seiko's Seiko 5 line. Those I basically just refuse to wear because they're constantly pulling hairs on my wrist. This one didn't give me much of a problem. Every once in a while I'd feel a slight tug, but for the most part it was unnoticeable. And yeah, I would have no problem wearing this on the folded link bracelet. And while that is probably a cost-saving measure on Citizen's part, it does undeniably fit in with the vintage aesthetics of this watch. But if you did want to change that out, it does look great on a variety of 18mm straps. Now, Strapsco gave me a bun strap to try out on this watch, and I was kind of having a lot of fun putting that on. It's not my style. I don't think I could really pull this off, but again, given the connection to the movie and Brad Pitt wearing it on sort of a cuff style strap or a bun style strap, I definitely wanted to give it a shot, and it does kind of have a fun feel to it. Sort of that quirky Paul Newman sort of racing style. And if you're kind of leaning into that, I think a lot of people might be interested in putting this on a bun strap. The other strap that I tried it out on was a simple black Italian leather strap from Vario, which they also gave to me. And this one, and I think it looks great on this black strap. I think the black strap really ties in well with the black bezel. It gives it a nice classic look, and it's very comfortable. So I think those are two great options if you're looking to sort of mix things up and have a little bit of fun with this watch. So to kind of conclude things, I want to talk a little bit about the value of this watch. Again, it's around $230, I think, if you convert it from yen to dollars, which puts it at an interesting price point. And I think if you look purely at the components of this watch, it's probably not worth $230. You could definitely find better built watches with higher quality components for this price. You could probably find better built chronographs from Citizen for this price. I've looked at a few on the channel. So that part I was a little bit disappointed because I do like Citizen and I know that they make some good budget chronographs. But to find a 38mm watch that really has that vintage sizing and that vintage look, that really carries over a lot of that heritage from Citizen's past with the challenge timer, which was a historic chronograph and has some significant heritage behind it. You know, to find that level of pedigree at this price is kind of rare. And there's not really a lot of watches that can compete with this when it comes to this style, if that's something that you're looking for. And so that's where I think this watch does offer some value. If you really want this style of watch, if you're going to really kind of lean into that, if that sort of vintage fun look is something that you're looking to add to your collection, or just kind of really fits your personality, I think this is a cool watch to pick up. And one thing I didn't mention is that Citizen backs this watch up with a 5-year warranty, which is pretty impressive. So even though the components are on the cheaper side, the build quality does look pretty solid. And it's not the kind of thing that I expect to fall apart or anything. But I think if they could have bumped basically all of the specs up one notch across the board, I think this would have been a much more compelling offer. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for today. If you enjoyed this video and enjoy collecting affordable watches, definitely invite you to hit the subscribe button so that you can follow along on future videos that I'll be putting out. And let me know what you think about this watch in the comments down below. Finally, don't forget to check out the t-shirt store. Link to that in the description down below. But that'll wrap it for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.